33 years of marriage, and the thing that undoes you isn't the moment they tell you. It's the Saturday morning, 3 weeks later when you wake up at 6:47, which is exactly when you always woke up, and for 4 seconds you don't remember. And then you do. My name is Walter Hebb. I taught automotive technology at Westview Secondary in Kitchener, Ontario for 26 years. Same shop, same smell of machine oil and cold concrete, same collection of grade 10 students who arrived in September, convinced that knowing how to change their own oil was beneath them, and left in June being wrong about that. It is a practical life, and I have always been a practical man. The kind who drives a truck that's paid off, fixes things instead of replacing them, and has never once described himself as complicated. Judith was complicated. Judith was the most complicated person I have ever loved, which is a sentence that took me years to be able to say without it feeling like a complaint. I met her in 1991 at a Canada Day party at my friend Norm's place in Waterloo. She was standing near the back fence, arguing with someone's uncle about NAFTA with the specific cheerful confidence of a person who already knew she was right. I walked over. Not because I had an opinion about NAFTA, but because I wanted to meet whoever was making. That uncle looked so thoroughly outmatched. She looked at me and said, "Do you know anything about trade policy?" I said, "Not really, but I know when someone's losing an argument." She laughed. That was July 1st, 1991. We were married 14 months later. We were different people. Not the kind of different that creates distance. The kind that creates balance. I fixed things with my hands. Judith fixed things with her mind. I was content in Kitchener. Judith was restless in the best possible way, always moving, always building, always interested in the next problem that needed solving. She had her consulting work, which started quietly in the mid-90s, work she described as helping companies figure out what they were actually doing wrong, as opposed to what they thought they were doing wrong. Later she called it organizational advisory work. The terminology got more formal as the years went on and the clients got larger. I never pressed her on the specifics. That was our agreement, arrived at naturally rather than negotiated, the way the real agreements in a long marriage usually are. She traveled. Not constantly, but regularly. 6-8 times a year. Toronto mostly, sometimes Montreal, occasionally Vancouver. She kept her professional life separate from our life in Kitchener, the way a careful person keeps tools organized in a shop. Not hidden, just properly stored where they belong. I trusted her. That is not a simple sentence when I say it now. It has weight to it. Thursday, February 8th, 2:19 p.m. The call came to my cell phone. I was in the shop doing an end-of-day walkthrough, checking that the students had put the equipment back properly, which they sometimes did and sometimes didn't. The number was a 416 area code, which is Toronto, which I noted without alarm because Judith was in Toronto. The voice on the phone was calm and professional in the specific way that emergency personnel learn to be when the information they are delivering is permanent. A collision on the Gardiner Expressway, a gray Volvo. Judith's plates. She had been transported to St. Michael's Hospital. By the time I got back on the phone with the hospital, 20 minutes later, the parking lot of Westview Secondary where I had sat in my truck, because I didn't know where else to go, she was already gone. My son-in-law Craig drove me to Toronto that evening. Our daughter Nora was already there, having driven herself from her place in Mississauga, and was standing in a hospital corridor when we arrived, with the particular expression of a person who has received devastating news and has been holding it together for 2 hours because someone needed to. She held together until she saw me. Then neither of us did. The week that followed is not something I can describe in sequence, because it didn't happen in sequence. It happened in fragments. The specific weight of the hospital paperwork, the sound of Nora on the phone with her brother, our son, Aaron, who was in Calgary and booked the first flight home. The way the Kitchener house felt when I walked back into it on Friday night, like a place that had already begun the process of becoming something other than what it had been. Aaron flew in Saturday morning. He is 31, quieter than Nora, and processes things internally the way I do, which means the two of us spent a lot of that weekend in the same room, not saying things and understanding each other perfectly well. The funeral was February 15th. Judith had more friends than I had known about in some cases, which is a sentence I would come to understand very differently in the weeks that followed. The service was at Knox Presbyterian on Duke Street. The eulogies were generous and specific in the way that means people actually knew her. I spoke last. I said that she had been the smartest person in any room she entered and had the unusual grace to make that fact comfortable rather than intimidating. I said that she had argued a stranger into the ground at a Canada Day party in 1991 and that I had been trying to keep up ever since. People laughed. Judith would have wanted that. Monday, February 19th, 10:40 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a coffee I wasn't drinking when the doorbell rang. The man on the step was mid-60s in a dark coat, carrying a briefcase with the kind of quiet purposefulness that suggests official business. He introduced himself as Raymond Chu, a notary and estate administrator operating out of Toronto. "Mr. Hebb, I apologize for the timing. I've been trying to reach you, but I understand the last week has been—" "Come in," I said. He sat across from me at the kitchen table. He opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. He produced a folder, a document with a notary seal, and an envelope, and on top of the envelope, a keycard. Small matte charcoal gray, with a number on the edge. 1407. "Your wife designated me as the administrator of a specific asset transfer," Raymond said. "She executed this documentation 18 months ago with instructions that it be delivered to you, personally within 14 days of her passing. The transfer is already complete. No probate required. The asset is titled directly in your name." I looked at the keycard. What asset? He placed a document in front of me. "A condominium unit, 250 King Street West, Toronto. Suite 1407. It's a 2-bedroom unit on the 14th floor," Raymond said. "Your wife purchased it 11 years ago through a numbered company. 18 months ago, she transferred the company's sole ownership to you personally, with instructions for this delivery upon her death." I looked at my name on the document, printed cleanly on an official form, attached to a property in Toronto that I had never once heard mentioned. "She never told me about this," I said. Raymond's expression was measured. "I'm not in a position to speak to what Mrs. Hebb chose to share. I can tell you that she was clear and deliberate in the documentation. The instructions were precise." He left 20 minutes later. I sat at the kitchen table with the keycard in front of me and the document beside it, and my coffee completely cold. Judith, I thought. What is this? Here is what I knew about Judith's consulting work, which is to say the outlines of it, not the interior. Early in our marriage she had come to me. We had been together maybe 12 years at that point, and said with the directness that was her most consistent quality, "Walter, the work I do has layers I can't fully describe. I'm not asking you to be comfortable with that. I'm asking you to trust me. And in return I'll tell you this, we are financially secure, everything I do is above board, and I am building something for us." I had asked one question. "Is it dangerous?" "No," she said. I believed her. I had 37 years of evidence for who Judith was. That is not nothing. That is everything, actually. But I was sitting at my kitchen table in Kitchener with a key card to a condo I didn't know I owned, and I was beginning to understand that trusting the right person and knowing everything about them are not the same thing, and the gap between those two facts was larger than I had realized. I called Norm that evening. Norm Beaulieu has been my closest friend since we played hockey together at the Waterloo Recreation Complex in 1988, and has the quality that you can call him at any hour and he will answer the phone and he will stay on as long as you need. He answered on the second ring. "Something happened," I said. "Tell me." I told him about Raymond Chu and the key card and the condo on King Street. Norm listened without interrupting. "He does that. It is one of the things that makes him a good friend. You haven't gone yet," he said when I finished. "No. Aaron goes back to Calgary Thursday. I don't want to." "I'll drive you," Norm said. "Whenever you're ready. I need to talk to a lawyer first." "Who?" "Linda Marsh. Linda Marsh is a real estate and estate lawyer in Waterloo who handled the purchase of our house on Dune Valley Drive and our basic estate documents some years back. She is the kind of lawyer who tells you what you need to hear and doesn't pad the conversation with qualifications you didn't ask for." I called her the next morning. By Tuesday afternoon, I had scanned and emailed the condo documents to her office. She responded at 10:15 that night. Reviewed. Legally clean. Come in Wednesday at 8. Linda's office is on King Street in Waterloo, second floor, with a window that looks out over a parking lot that she has always joked gives her the most honest view in the city. She had the documents in front of her when I arrived. The numbered company has been operating for 11 years, she said. It has paid condo fees, property taxes, and maintenance assessments on time every quarter without exception. It carries no debt. The unit was purchased outright. How much? I asked. Linda turned a page. Purchase price 11 years ago, $680,000. Current estimated value, based on the King West Corridor comparables. She paused. Approximately $111 to $1.3 million. I looked out her window at the parking lot. The company's stated business purpose, she continued, is management consulting and advisory services. She set the document down and looked at me steadily. Walter, I need to ask, you had no knowledge of this property? Or the company? None. She was quiet for a moment. There's a registered agent listed on the company filings, a woman named Sylvia Brandt. She's described as a business associate, Sylvia Brandt. I had never heard that name. I'm going to see the condo first, I said. Of course. Linda picked up the keycard and held it out to me. Walter, whatever she left in there, she left it for you. She had 18 months to change her mind about any of this. She didn't. The drive from Waterloo to King Street West in Toronto takes roughly an hour and 20 minutes on a good day. I know because Norm drove, and I watched the 401 go by without seeing it, running through everything I knew about Judith and counting the ways I had not known enough. The building at 250 King West went up during the downtown Toronto condo boom of the 2010s. 22 stories, a lobby that is not trying to impress anyone but succeeds anyway. The kind of building where the mailroom is organized and the elevator is quiet and the carpet in the hallways has never been the wrong choice. Wednesday, February 28th, 11:15 a.m. The building superintendent, a man named Gerald, met me in the lobby. He was matter-of-fact and kind in the specific way of someone who manages a building and has seen most things. He had been contacted by Raymond Chu, apparently, because he greeted me by name and offered his condolences without my having to explain the situation. Mrs. Hebb was well regarded here, he said carefully. She was a regular presence. We respected her privacy. She was here often, I asked. Often enough that we knew her. A pause. 14 is the button on the left. I took the elevator alone. 14 floors is not high by Toronto standards, but the 14th floor of 250 King West looks out over the city in a way that rewards attention. I stood in the hallway for a moment, at the end of the corridor, where a window faces north, the CN Tower visible between buildings, the lake a gray line below the skyline on a February morning. I stood at the door of 1407, keycard in my hand. She wanted you to have this, Norm had said. She went to considerable trouble to make sure of it. I put the card to the reader. The light turned green. The unit was not large by penthouse standards, but it was thoughtfully arranged. A living area with a good couch, a workspace along one wall with a standing desk and a bookshelf. Organized in a way I recognized as Judith's, by subject, then by author within subject, 2 levels of sorting that most people don't bother with. A kitchen that was better equipped than our kitchen in Kitchener. Large windows on the west wall, with a view of the city that in the late afternoon, I would learn, turns the color of something you'd want to look at for a while. All of that I registered in approximately 3 seconds, because in the 4th second, I saw that there was someone in the room, sitting at the desk with reading glasses on, and a binder open in front of her was a woman I had never seen. Early 60s with close cropped silver hair, wearing a blazer and a composure that said she had been expecting this, or something close to it, and had prepared accordingly. She looked up when the door opened and stood slowly. Mr. Hebb, she said, I'm Sylvia Brandt. The next several seconds were the particular kind of stillness where your brain is processing more information than it can complete all at once. The registered agent. The name Linda had found in the company filings. Standing in Judith's condo with a binder open and the settled presence of someone who had been there before, many times, and had come today knowing this moment was approaching. How did you get in? I asked. My voice was even. 26 years of teaching teenagers has given me the ability to keep my voice even when the situation calls for it. Judith gave me a key 11 years ago, Sylvia said. I come by occasionally to water the plants. I wanted to collect some documents before the transfer was finalized and I wasn't sure. She paused. I should have called. I'm sorry. Truly. Who are you to her? I asked. She held the binder in both hands. The posture of someone who has thought about how to have this conversation and intends to have it correctly. I was Judith's business partner. Her primary one for the last 9 years, before that. A colleague. We worked in organizational advisory, corporate clients, companies going through board disputes, leadership transitions, regulatory scrutiny, situations where they needed someone outside the normal chain to come in and assess what was actually happening versus what they were telling themselves was happening. She paused. Judith was extraordinarily good at it, the best I have ever worked with. I looked at Sylvia Brandt. I looked at the workspace, the bookshelf, the organized kitchen. I looked at the view out the west window, gray Toronto in February, the lake beyond everything. She used this place for work, I said. Yes, meetings, mostly. Client confidentiality requires neutral ground. Not a client's boardroom, not her home. This was her professional space. Why didn't she tell me? Sylvia chose her words, the way Judith always chose words when the words mattered, deliberately, from the available options, selecting the most accurate one. She said, you were the most straightforward person she had ever known, and she meant it as the highest form of compliment. She said her work required a kind of contained knowledge. People who know need to know, and that you didn't need to know because it didn't touch your life, and that telling you would create worry she couldn't manage from the outside. I sat down in the chair across from the couch. Tell me what she actually did, the real work. Sylvia sat back down. She opened the binder. When a company is in distress, internal politics, leadership breakdown, a board that's lost confidence in an executive, a merger going sideways, they sometimes need an outside voice with no visible connection to any faction. Someone who can come in, read the landscape accurately, and advise on what needs to happen. Not a management consultant in the traditional sense, something more surgical. Judith had a gift for identifying where the real problem was, as opposed to where everyone was pointing. The clients, I said. Significant ones. Several in the TSX 60, a few American companies with Canadian operations. The work was well compensated because the stakes were high and the discretion was absolute. How well compensated? I asked. Because I am a man who taught high school shop class and drove a 2016 F-150 and had a mortgage that we paid off 7 years ago, and I needed to understand the dimensions of what I was sitting in. Sylvia turned a page in the binder and placed it on the coffee table in front of me. A financial summary. Judith's numbered company. 9 years of revenue. I looked at the numbers. Then I looked again. This is annual, I said, not a question. In good years, yes. The work was project-based. Some years were quieter, but the retained clients were loyal and the referrals were consistent. She paused. Judith was very good at what she did, Mr. Hebb, and she was very careful about it. I set the page down and looked out the west window. Toronto doing its midday thing below, the lake gray and flat in February light, the highway overpasses and the glass towers and the particular compressed energy of a city that doesn't stop. 33 years, I thought. She was building this the whole time. Not all of it. 9 years of the current work, some version of it longer. She had said, I am building something for us. She had not been wrong. She had been describing an understatement large enough to have its own postal code. If you've been with us a while and these stories matter to you, hitting the like button and subscribing is what keeps this going. Most people don't, but you're clearly not most people. Now, we are nowhere near done. Sylvia and I talked for close to 2 hours. She was precise about the mechanics of the work, the ethics of it, the way Judith had operated, meticulous, documented, always on the right side of the line. The work was legal, Sylvia said, completely and documentably so. Judith understood that advisory work at that level only survives if the person doing it is unimpeachable. One gray area and the whole practice collapses. She didn't have gray areas. She described the clients by situation rather than name. A mining company board fracturing over a CEO succession that had been handled badly. A financial services firm in the middle of a regulatory review that had retained outside advisors and then stopped listening to them. A family-run manufacturing company in Hamilton where the second generation was trying to remove the third before the third was ready, and everyone was wrong about who needed to go. Judith had gone in, assessed, and advised. Every time. She loved it, Sylvia said. It wasn't wistful. It was factual. She was energized by complex problems. She used to say it was the opposite of a shop. She stopped. Ed. Go ahead. She said you worked with your hands and built things that were permanent, and that she solved problems that dissolved the moment they were fixed. She liked the contrast. She said the two of you made sense together because of it. I sat with that. She talked about your work? I said. Often. She was proud of you, not in a condescending way, in the way that someone is proud of a person who does something well and does it with their whole self. Sylvia looked at me directly. She said you were the most grounded person she knew, and that it made everything else possible. Outside, a cloud moved off the sun, and the west window went briefly bright, the lake catching light 30 floors below, in a way that probably would have been beautiful if I had been in a state to notice beauty. She built this for us, I said. Yes. The practical explanation is that she needed a dedicated space she controlled entirely, neutral ground for sensitive client meetings. But I think, Sylvia paused, I think she also needed a space that was hers, a professional self that existed separately. She loved your life in Kitchener, Mr. Hebb. She loved you and Nora and Aaron. This wasn't running from anything. This was having a complete self. I nodded. It was the most Judith thing I had ever heard said about her by someone I had only just met. The binder, I said. What's in it? Documents she wanted you to have. A summary of the company's current position, account contacts, and a letter. Sylvia picked it up and held it out. She prepared this 18 months ago when she did the ownership transfer. When she gave it to me, she said, if something happens and Walter comes to the unit, give him this. He'll know what to do. I took the binder. She thought I would know what to do. She had apparently always believed that. I did not know it yet. Had not opened the binder, had not read the letter, had not understood what the account summary on page 3 was going to show me. I did not know yet about a man named Philip Sue, or what he intended to claim once the ownership transfer was publicly recorded. I did not know about the questions that would come from the insurance review, or the decision Nora was going to ask me to make before spring. I stood at Judith's window with Judith's binder in my hands and Judith's view of the city in front of me, and felt something I had not expected to feel in that room. Not anger, not betrayal, something closer to awe. 33 years, and she was still a person I was learning. There is a particular quality to reading words written by someone who no longer exists in the world. Not the texts or the emails, those were written for the ordinary moments. A letter written 18 months before death, written by someone who knew it might be the last direct word between two people, written with care and intention, and the specific weight of someone choosing what they needed you to know. That is a different kind of reading entirely. You feel the thought behind every sentence. You feel the person selecting these words for you, specifically, knowing you might receive them from the other side of an absence. I sat on Judith's couch with the Toronto skyline in the west window and the binder open on my lap. Sylvia had left at 1:30, with a handshake and her card and an assurance that she was reachable for anything I needed. The unit was quiet, the kind of quiet that a room holds when it has been lived in by one person for a long time. The letter was on top, Judith's handwriting, small and precise, the cursive she'd had since university that nobody learns anymore. Walter, if you're reading this, something happened, and I wasn't there to explain it the right way. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. The compartments, the not telling, the years of trusting me without knowing what you were trusting me with. You did it anyway because that's who you are, and I want you to know I never took that lightly. Not once. Let me try to tell you what I couldn't while I was alive. The work was real. Everything Sylvia tells you is accurate. I kept it separate not only to protect you, but because I needed it to be separate. I needed something that was entirely mine, that I controlled entirely. I know that sounds like a selfish thing to say. It was, a little. It was also necessary. I was afraid that if I explained it, The questions would make it harder to maintain, and I was afraid of your worry, which I knew would be genuine. I told myself the separation was protection. Some of it was. Some of it was also just needing a room of my own. What I want you to understand is that none of it was about you. Not one day of it was a rejection of our life. Our life in Kitchener, the house, you teaching those kids how to take care of their cars. I chose that. I chose you. Every year, still you. Still the man from Norm's backyard who told me he didn't know anything about trade policy but could tell when someone was losing an argument. I never found a better answer than the one you gave that night. The practical things, because I know that's what you need from me right now. The company summary is on page 3. Ruth at the brokerage. Her number is on page 2, has been briefed and is expecting your call. Linda Marsh has a sealed envelope from me, to be opened only after you've read this letter. She'll explain the rest. The unit is yours to do with as you choose. Sell it, keep it, let Nora use it when she has client meetings in the city. I chose this building because it holds its value, and because the west window in the late afternoon is the best thing I know how to give you. I wanted to give you something that took care of you. You always took care of everything else without being asked. There is one thing I need you to do. Page 4. I loved you every day, Walter. Every complicated, carefully organized, imperfect day of it, Judith. I read it twice. Then I sat with it for a while without reading anything, because some things require sitting with before they can be properly received. She chose me, I thought. Every day, including the days I didn't know she was choosing. I turned to page 4, 3 paragraphs. The first named a man called Philip Sue, described as a former referral partner, who had connected Judith with 2 significant clients early in her practice in exchange for an introduction fee, a documented arrangement that had been fulfilled and closed 6 years prior. The second paragraph said, Philip has been making noise in the last year about claiming a continuing interest in the practice. He has no such interest. The documentation is with Conrad Webb. She listed a Toronto barrister I didn't recognize, and it is complete. Do not engage with Philip directly. Call Conrad. The third paragraph said, Philip is a man who mistakes patience for weakness. He has been waiting for a moment when the practice would be undefended. Don't give him one. You are not as unfamiliar with this kind of person as you might think. You have dealt with 17-year-olds who try the same thing every September. The strategy is identical. Be clear, be brief, and don't negotiate. I set the page down. She left me instructions, I thought. She left me a complete map. I called Linda Marsh from the unit at 2:30. She left a letter, I said. She mentioned you. A sealed envelope. I have it. She told me not to open it until you called me from the unit specifically. She said if you called from there, it meant you had read the letter including page 4. She was right. The envelope contains the full company account summary and Conrad Webb's contact information. A pause. Walter, before you look at page 3 of the binder, I want you to be sitting down. I'm sitting. Look at the bottom line. The total. I turned to page 3, found the number, looked at it again. Linda, yes. This is what I think it is. Combined company holdings, retained earnings, and the unit at current valuation. Yes. That's what it is. She said it the way that lawyers say things when they have had time to prepare. Steady, professionally steady. The number on page 3 was not a number that belongs in the life of a shop teacher from Kitchener who drives a paid-off truck and replaces his own brake pads. It was a number from a different category of life entirely, the category that comes with a financial advisor and an estate manager, and, presumably, a Toronto barrister named Conrad Webb. She said we were financially secure. She had used, I was certain at that moment, the most spectacular understatement of our 33-year marriage. What do I do first? I asked. Call Conrad Webb today if you can. After that, do nothing, say nothing, and sign nothing until you've spoken to him. And Walter, Linda paused. Judith made sure you were going to be all right. She did it with the same thoroughness she apparently applied to everything else. Philip Sue called my cell at 4:45 that afternoon. I was still in the underground parking garage of 250 King West, sitting in Norm's truck. I had spent the last hour upstairs in the unit, going through the rest of the binder, making notes in the margins of a legal pad I found in the desk drawer, organizing what I needed to understand into the kind of list I have made In my shop, for 26 years, when a problem has more parts than the obvious ones, I let it go to voicemail. The message was smooth, unhurried, condolence forward in the way of someone who has gave this type of call before. He mentioned knowing Judith, mentioned an arrangement that he felt needed to be addressed at my earliest convenience. Left a number. I forwarded the voicemail to Linda. Then I called Conrad Webb. Conrad was in his late 50s, direct and organized in the way of a barrister, who has spent his career dealing with exactly these situations and has learned to be efficient about them. Judith had briefed him fully. Of course she had. Judith had briefed everyone, working backwards from the worst-case scenario with the same thoroughness she apparently brought to everything. He walked me through the Philip Sue documentation in 40 minutes, the original introduction arrangement, the agreed fee, 6 years of records confirming it was paid and closed, Philip's signature on the closure agreement, the correspondence from 14 months ago when Philip had raised the continuing interest claim, and Conrad's response to that, and Philip's failure to respond substantively. He has no claim, Conrad said. Not on the unit, not on the practice, not on anything in your wife's estate. His arrangement was specific, time-limited, and settled. He acknowledged it in writing. Then why is he calling me? Because your wife just died, and the ownership transfer just recorded, and he's betting you don't know any of this. A pause. He's done this kind of thing before. He looks for moments of disorientation. What do I do when he calls again? Give him my number. Nothing else. Philip Sue called again 2 days later. I had driven back to Kitchener the night before, slept in my own bed for the first time in what felt like longer than 2 weeks, woken at 6:47, the 4 seconds, then remembering. I let it ring once, then answered. Mr. Sue, I said. I'm going to give you a phone number. His name is Conrad Webb. He has the complete documentation from your arrangement with my wife, including the closure agreement with your signature. A pause on the line. I won't be discussing this further. Conrad's number is. I read it out. Take care of yourself, I said. I hung up. Judith, I thought. You even mapped the exits. I called Nora and Aaron that evening on a video call. Nora, from her Mississauga living room. Aaron from his Calgary kitchen. Both of them with the particular tired look of people who are 3 weeks into grief and beginning to understand that it has a long middle section nobody warns you about. I told them about the unit, about Sylvia Brandt, about the company, about the letter. I told them the practical facts before I told them the number, because the practical facts are what make the number make sense. When I told them the number, Aaron was quiet for a long moment. Then, Dad, Mom did all of this and never. She did, I said. 9 years of this work, and some form of it before. Nora was quiet in the way she gets when she's processing at depth rather than at speed. Then she said, she gave you the unit specifically, yes. Not just the company. Not just the money. The unit. Yes. Nora looked at the screen the way her mother used to look at problems she was close to solving. She needed you to be able to stand in it, to walk through it and understand it was real. She knew how you work. I looked at my daughter, 33 years old, her mother's precision of thought with my patience over the top of it. The combination was, as it had always been, more than the sum of its parts. Yeah, I said. That's right. Are you going to sell it? I thought about the west window, the late afternoon light Judith had described, the bookshelf organized in 2 levels of sorting, the way the couch faced the view rather than the room. Not yet, I said, not for a while. The insurance review came in March, a routine inquiry, standard process for a claim of Judith's policy size. A coordinator named Wendy called, asked questions for about 20 minutes. I referred her to Conrad for the business documentation and to Linda for the estate. Both had been briefed. The file closed in under 4 weeks. I went back to Westview Secondary in late March. My classroom, my shop, the particular smell of concrete and machine oil, and whatever someone had been cooking in the staff room. My students had been told something happened to me and had, in the way of teenagers who have decided to be decent, made a collective and unspoken agreement not to be difficult. They kept it for about 2 weeks before reverting. It was a relief, actually. Normal is a thing you want back after you have been without it. I taught the unit on internal combustion engines the way I always teach it. From the ground up, starting with the physics of why it works before getting to the mechanics of how. I have always thought that if you understand why something works, you can figure out how to fix it yourself when it breaks. That month I taught it with a different kind of attention, the knowledge that Judith had been doing her version of the same thing, starting from why, working outward, for years. In a city I drove past twice a year without ever knowing she had a life in it. Some things are built in the spaces between the visible parts of a life. She had always understood that better than I did. Norm came for dinner on a Saturday in April. We ate at the kitchen table, Judith's kitchen, the casserole dish she always used on the counter because I had gotten it out by habit and not put it back. Norm brought beer. We ate. The house held the kind of quiet that it was going to hold from now on, which I was learning to take as company rather than absence. The unit, Norm said. What are you going to do with it? Nora wants to use it when she has Toronto meetings, fewer hotel nights. I picked up my beer. I went back last week, sat in it for an hour, watched the afternoon come through the west window. And I thought about Judith's letter. I wanted to give you something that took care of you the way you always took care of everything else, without being asked. I'm keeping it, I said. For now. Maybe longer. Norm nodded. We were quiet for a while. The April street outside the window, the last of the snow gone. Kitchener going through its spring the way it always does, with a kind of resolute practicality that suits it. Walter, Norm said. Are you okay? I thought about how to answer that. I thought about Sylvia Brandt, and the binder, and the west window. I thought about Conrad Webb and Philip Sue on the phone, saying Conrad's number back at him. I thought about Nora saying she needed you to be able to stand in it, and being right, in the way her mother was always right, precisely and without fuss. I thought about a woman who had built something extraordinary in intervals of an ordinary life and had documented every piece of it with the specific care of someone who intended for it to survive her, who had left instructions, contacts, sealed envelopes, a map from the moment she stopped being present to the moment I could manage without one, who had chosen me at a Canada Day party in Waterloo in 1991 and had kept choosing me, quietly, in the parts of her life I hadn't known to look for. I am a 59-year-old shop teacher from Kitchener. I drive a truck with a dent in the rear quarter panel I keep meaning to fix. I own, pending whatever decision makes sense, a unit in downtown Toronto currently valued at more money than I have conceptual access to, with a west window that does something remarkable in the late afternoon. I have been loved for 33 years by someone so careful and so thorough that she arranged, in writing and with legal force, to keep taking care of me after she was gone. Yeah, I said to Norm, I think so. He raised his bottle. I raised mine. We didn't need anything else. Outside, a neighbor's dog was making an argument about something in the alley. The street was doing what streets in Kitchener do in April, wet and specific and quietly getting on with it. Judith had always liked April here. She said it was an honest month. Nothing performing, nothing pretending to be further along than it was. Just things becoming what they were going to become, at the pace they were going to take. I have thought about that a lot, since she was, in every way that mattered, exactly who she said she was. The compartments didn't change that. The unit didn't change it. The number on page 3 didn't change it. 33 years of the most organized, most privately complicated, most thoroughly loving person I ever met, choosing me every single one of those years, in ways I am still finding out about. That's the whole story. The unit is still on King West. The west window is still there, and every time I go up, which is more than a practical person probably should, I stand at the window and look at the city and think, well done, Judith. You always did see further ahead than I did.